I met a gypsy.
The another thing that I've kind of noticed as well, that because like I've only got one kidney, so but it's like double the size basically. So like I just got my bloods done the other day, and like I still have normal kidney function. But yeah, hydration to me just is like a bane of my existence. Like, and I think part of it is because I've got to sit down and do podcasts for 3 hours, and then it's like I'm just not in a place where like I just regularly want to be pissing that much, because it's like super fucking inconvenient. But like, man, I'll notice I can eat ramen for dinner at night and wake up with like a crazy headache and fully dehydrated because I've eaten too much salt. And there's even times where I felt like with magnesium, like I've had more magnesium than normal, because I don't really measure. I'll just use like a teaspoon and put it in, and I'm like, fuck, I feel like that's kind of cooked me a little bit too. So I definitely feel like the salt intake versus water intake is something, like, at least for me personally, like I've got to be so onto that.
Oh, everyone's got to be. This first product that we release, all it is, it's called like hydration, and that's all we do, because that's the biggest issue I found across the board, is that everyone was confused about hydration. Didn't matter if you're a UFC world champ or just a guy walking into the gym. Everyone's confused about it because it's so intricate in your body. The salt-water balance in your body is so intricate, and a lot of people don't know this. They think when I drink water, that's hydrating me, but to an extent. But out of all the beverages you can have, water is probably the least hydrating. Like if you just chug a bunch of water, you'll piss a bunch of water out.
Yeah.
Because the way that our body dictates how to retain and release water is by the electrolytes that are in there and the sodium balance of it. And then there's 3 different ways that you can put it in, 3 different formulations, and it determines what that fluid does in the body. So 3 different concentrations of salt and carbohydrates that you can make up, and each one of those will dictate a different response to what happens to that fluid. Which is, okay, we're going to get deep here, but we may as well. So when you get, say, like a Powerade, it's isotonic. You've heard that term, like isotonic hydration. So that's basically matching the sodium concentration of your sweat. And so what it does, it just goes.
So you're sweated out, you put that in.
Doesn't really work like that. But when you get in, there's a few things like you need to get right. You've got to drink it. It's got to go from your mouth down your esophagus into your stomach. Where we absorb most of that is going to be in your small intestine, which is just outside your stomach. So we've got to get it through the stomach. That's the big first hurdle. And so the more carbohydrate a drink has, the slower it'll come out.
And so carbs are sugar, essentially.
Yeah, carbs are sugar, essentially. So when you've got a Powerade, say
it's full of sugar.
Yeah, so it's going to be slower to get through there. And then when you've got like a Maximus or something, which is even more sugar, it's going to be even more slower. The thing is with those drinks is that they're not necessarily geared towards hydration. They're geared towards getting the sugar back in for, like, if you're playing an AFL game or motocross or whatever, you're burning lots of carbohydrates. Getting those carbohydrates in are important, but they're going to be slower to get that fluid through.
Yeah.
And so, like, the drink that we made is what's called a hypotonic drink. And what you do is you bring the carbohydrates down a lot, and so it rushes through the stomach really fast. And then the mixture of sodium, potassium, magnesium, chloride, and all of that, what it does is that it goes across from your intestine into your blood really quickly. And then from your blood, it takes it to all your cells. And it's just the ratio that's in, it'll skip over into your cells really fast. So it's like a rapid hydration formula. But the goal for that supplement is not to replace the carbohydrates.
Yeah.
So like when we have endurance athletes or things that we work with, we say we rapidly want to rehydrate you. Like after weigh-ins, perfect example, guys are just dehydrated. We need to rapidly get that fluid back in.
Yeah.
Drink a drink like this, and later on you can have like a Gatorade or a Maximus that has way more carbohydrates, because the priority shifts to getting those carbohydrates in.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if we get the fluid in slower. But that's like why we say for athletes, like if you're competing at a jiu-jitsu comp and you're like sweating heaps and blah, 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 the priority is to match that fluid loss.
Yeah.
And if you're having like Gatorades and things like that, you're slowing that process down.
Yeah.
So it's like we give people this supplement and they're just like, oh, it's just electrolytes, that's it. And I'm like, oh man, I was like, you don't understand how many, like I've got a fluid balance expert, Dr. Lewis James in Loughborough University helped me formulate this, and then all these other guys that I'm connected to, and they're like very big names in the sports nutrition world, and everyone's like, oh, it's just like these are like electrolytes, right? And like it is essentially, but man, you have no idea what we went through to get this like mixture of this thing right, to make sure that it passes through and gets into the blood as fast as possible. And like when I made it, it was for weigh-ins, like after weigh-ins, because with our guys, we were just like, man, we've got to be certain that what we're putting in, they're not pissing out that fluid, because we just lost 5 kilos of water essentially in a bathtub. We need to put that in and then some.
Yeah.
We got to put like 6, 7 back in, but you've got to fight in 24 hours. And then we've got to eat, and you've got to get a training session in.
Yeah.
So we don't have the time to mess around and kind of guess, oh, is this going back in? We need to make sure that this like works.
Yeah.
And that's what I found. And then what's cool about it is that we use it with all our guys, is that we say if you wake up in the morning, you're probably going to be dehydrated because you didn't eat or drink in that overnight fast. And that's like a lot of people like, oh, I feel crappy and sluggish and tired. It's like,
yeah, I get like headaches in the morning. Like there's times where I wake up, but I'm like, I think dehydrated.
yeah,
like,
and
it's
you're
not
probably
like
dehydrated. So that's what we say is like, have this, because a lot of people just chug water and it'll help. Like the water will help, but you'll end up peeing a lot of it out because there's not the salts in there.
Yeah.
So like have one of these in the morning, and then you know that you're going to rapidly put all that fluid everywhere, and then just go about your day. And then like the other big issue that we found with our guys who train multiple times a day, they'll go into that first session. They're probably all over everything that first session, and then they'll walk off the mats, and then they'll just grab like a Coke Zero,
Yeah.
and then they'll go grab their food, and then they won't think about it. And then they'll go to their next session, and they wouldn't have replaced any of the fluid.
Yeah.
So they're going into that next session dehydrated, training for 2-3 hours, getting more dehydrated. And
Yeah,
then,
I won't go to training if I know I haven't drunk enough water.
yeah.
Because I'm just like, this will fuck me. Like, and I'll end up, I feel like I'm always, like right now I feel dehydrated. Like I know that I haven't, because I feel like hydration's like it's a process of days. Like it's not something that I feel like you'd have to be in like a surplus to like let yourself go down a little bit, but I feel like I operate on like the edge of hydration at all times, and like if I dip down at all, I'm now dehydrated. Like I don't really have like reserves of water, if that makes sense. And yeah, I literally like, I'd love going doing saunas, and I can't do a sauna today. I'm like, I could maybe do a sauna in like a couple of days because that's how long it's going to take me to feel really good and full of water. So I don't know if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And it's the biggest bit of feedback I get from my clients is like the first thing we make them do is drink a certain amount of fluid every day. And then like if they're like very salty sweaters, we make sure they put the electrolytes and everything back in. And they're like, oh man, like I've just got so much energy. I feel so much better. Like, oh, like I'm focusing so much more at work. Like, oh, this diet's great. It's like, it's
just the water.
It's not the diet. Like you're just drinking more because you're not chronically dehydrated 24/7, which I think, again, people push all of that to the side and go for these random weird supplements on the shelves, being like, this is going, or like weird nootropics or whatever. This is going to give me the edge, blah, blah, blah. Let's pack it in the bag and let's go. It's like, nah, like these very simple things like staying on top of your water intake when your body is 70% water and every single metabolic reaction in your body is happening in a body of water. That's probably pretty important to stay on top of. No wonder you feel so shit when you're not, when you're chugging back your curcumin latte tablets or whatever, and then your nootropics and everything else, but you're ignoring just basic water.
Yeah, no, and I feel like I sit square in that category. So when you were talking about having carbohydrates in your stomach while you're trying to hydrate, and that's going to slow the process down, is that in the food, in the water that you're taking, or the fluid you're taking on in general? So like, let's say you've had a muesli bar. That would be carbohydrates in your stomach. And then you have your electrolyte drink, and then you drink it on top of that. Are the carbohydrates from the muesli bar going to slow down the absorption of electrolytes? Or is it in the container that it's kind of you're ingesting it in?
That's such a good question. I feel like I had this question on like my 3rd year sports nutrition exam. That's actually a really good question. Yes, firstly, the solution matters. So the solution that you're putting that fluid in, it's what we call the osmolarity. And what that essentially means is the concentration of stuff in that body of fluid.
Yeah.
So the osmolarity of our drink, the way we call it hypertonic, is because it's
got no real carbohydrates.
Well, yeah, and it's less concentrated than what your blood is. And because there's going to be a gradient difference, it's like your whole body works on gradient differences and concentration gradients, it's going to want to flip. Your body's going to move fluid into the more concentrated area to dilute it, to balance it out.
Yeah.
And so what's going to dictate that is like how much salt and magnesium, potassium and everything, and how much carbohydrate we have in there. So we keep that low so it's less concentrated, goes through faster. The way that your stomach is shaped is that when you drink fluid kind of comes down here, and when you eat food, it comes up here.
Okay.
So like, yeah, so what I say to people, say we've got like marathon runners or whatever, we say like drink your electrolytes and eat your carbs.
Yeah.
Because your carbs will still be getting digested and they'll pass through, and that gastric emptying process will be slower. But then we know that you're getting that fluid passing through into your small intestine. Whereas opposed to if someone drank, say, the electrolyte drink and then smashed a Gatorade or a Maximus, it's going to mix.
It's going to sit in the body,
and it's going to change the osmolarity or the concentration of that fluid, and it's going to change the dynamics of what happens in the body.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you get pretty deep with it, but that's like when people are like, oh, it's just electrolytes. Like, yeah,
but that makes sense.
Kind of is, yeah. So that's essentially what you're doing, and that's like the tricky part. And that's like, it's called an oral rehydration solution. And like, we talk about like right at the start of like the privilege of being in like our world. You talk like oral rehydration, that technology, figuring that out saves millions of lives of people who don't have access to like clean drinking water because they would otherwise die of dehydration. And like, so understanding how to get that and allow the body to retain that fluid without pissing it out literally saves millions of lives.
That's insane, eh? So what would be like the ideal protocol for the average person to stay hydrated? Or like, say me that does like a training session each day, you would have an idea of what that session would look like. So what would a good hydration protocol be?
Yeah, again, it's hard to give. I'll give you numbers and you can apply it. So 30 mils times your body weight in kilos.
Would that be 0.03?
So no, 30. So you'll do it in mils. So 30 mils times, say, 75 kilograms. Some quick math is going to be 2.1, 2.2 or something. Yeah, something like that. 2.2 liters. That's your baseline that your body will probably need.
Yeah. And that's just before exercise, before anything.
Exercise. So and then we say to our guys, when you go to your session, weigh yourself before. This would be really good for your motocross guys to do. Weigh yourself before it, jump off after and weigh and see how much you lost. Like, take into account what you drank and pissed out and like get good estimates, but figure out how much you lost. And that's a crazy number. Like, I'll run 30, 40 Ks and I'll start like the training session, I'll load up the day before, I'll be like 73 kilos and I'll finish that at like 67, 68. And that's plus I'm drinking on the way. So you lose a lot of fluid doing those, like, and same with motocross, jiu-jitsu.
Oh yeah, dude. My gear bag weighs like fucking probably a couple kilos more because of all the sweat that's in my gear. And then you chuck your gear in, like you can feel it when you throw your gear in the thing.
Crazy amount of fluid loss. And then so what you've got to do, again, you've got to put that back in, but your body's going to keep metabolizing. You're going to keep perspiring fluid out. You're going to keep sweating it out.
So it's something you've always got to stay ahead of.
Yeah, but you've got to put in 1.2 to 1.5 more than what you lost. So say you lost 1 kilo, you got to put 1 liter. You got to put in 1.2 to 1.5 back in, and then you get like another layer and like we do sodium sweat tests with our guys, like to see how much
salt is in the
sweat. Because people can be crazy salt sweaters and people are just not. And then you work that out and go, okay, you need to replace this much sodium. And you don't have to do that with electrolyte supplements or anything. You can do that. We say salt your foods, do all that first, and then if we need to make up lost ground, use this. But like, do it in your food. It's cheaper. It's easier. It's blah blah blah. But yeah, that's the process we do, and do that for every training session. And it's a crazy amount. And that's when you work it out and you look at it, you go, that's so much fluid. And then you think about it and you go, well, it's not, because that's the amount your body needs. That's what you've lost. This is what you got to put back in. That's basically your baseline values. No wonder you feel so shit and dehydrated all the time, is because you're probably drinking a fourth or a third of that.
If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe. And to listen to the full 3-hour podcast, search Gypsy Tales in your favorite podcast platform or click the link in the description below. Gypsy Gang.